to another midweek teaching, and we're recording 3 videos in a row today, so hopefully we'll space them out for you, and as we go, we'll all enjoy these wonderful scriptures. Now, what if I told you that the resurrection happened in the first century and is actually documented in Matthew 27? That might be a little surprising to many folks, but I'm going to try to make that case. And again, as always, guys, I don't slam my fists, but I'm going to try to present the case, and I'm just hoping you'll give me an opportunity to see if I can't prove it. So, let's go to the scriptures. And here we are in Matthew 27. Very, very controversial, by the way, because it's, for lack of better words, it's a bit of a one-man out kind of a thing, where this is the only time where you see this resurrection, okay? And it's in 52, 53, okay? But we're going to grab a little context first, all right? So grabbing it at Matthew 27, verse 46, it says this. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is to say, my God, why have you forsaken me? So Jesus is still alive on the cross here. Some of them that stood there, when they heard it, they said, this man calls for Elijah. And notice it's Elias, but it's actually Elijah there. It's the translation. And as we continue, it says, and straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on the reed and gave him to drink. The rest said, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. Okay. Jesus, when he had cried, again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. All right, so here's where Jesus dies on the cross. Okay. Immediately when he dies on the cross, look what happens. It says, behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake and the rocks rent. Right? But here's where I'm going to suggest to you is what, and I'm not an English major, guys, but best as I can tell, I believe that this is a prolepsis. It's essentially a fast forward, okay? And I'm going to explain myself further. And why am I saying that it's not here at the cross? Well, because it says the following, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the graves, but when? After his resurrection. Wait a minute. Jesus is still on the cross here. He just gave up the ghost in verse 50. Do you see what I'm saying? He hasn't even been taken down from the cross yet. He hasn't been buried. He rose again on the 3rd day. This would have had to have happened after the 3rd day. Why would the writer put it here? Well, I'm going to make a suggestion. It's what we call, I believe, and anyway, as best as I could find, the word is prolepsis. It's a fast forward. Let me give you a suggestion. It's kind of like if I'm telling you a story about a young lady who grew up in some poverty and she was trying to get an education. She finally managed to get a little bit of an education, but hard time, trying to find a job. And she worked so hard, but she could barely make ends meet, but eventually this young lady ended up, when she was 52, she got became the CEO of Pepsi, but when she was younger, she struggled a lot. Do you see what I just did there? I told you the result, a fast forward real quick to say, but eventually she became this, right? And then I brought you back to where I was telling you how she struggled when she was a young lady. I'm going to suggest to you that this is what's going on here, all right? Please allow me to further prove my point. So the graves are open, many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the grave after his resurrection. We don't know how much after, do we? No, we don't. But we do know it's after the resurrection because the first begotten of the dead is Jesus, and we'll look at those scriptures. And of course, these folks who resurrected went into the holy city and appeared unto many. It doesn't say it appeared unto everybody. Could have been everybody, but many, we're not really sure. We just know for sure there was a lot, right? But again, after his resurrection, okay? So we go to 54, it says, now when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus, what did they see? They saw the earthquake. Okay, that's here, right here in 51, right? And those things that were done, I'm going to suggest that's the rocks renting and the temple renting, okay? They feared greatly, saying, truly, this was the Son of God. Well, wait a minute. This is back at the cross, isn't it? Do you see what I'm saying? They couldn't have seen any of this because this is after his resurrection. And how do I further prove that? Well, follow it through. It says, and many women were there, beholding afar off, which followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering unto him, among which was Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and mother of Zebedee's children. When the even was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple, and he went to Pilate and begged for the body of Jesus. Okay, so wait a minute. So the body of Jesus is still on the cross here, folks. That's where it is, still on the cross. Even in verse 56 and 57, right? And then Pilate commanded that the body to be delivered. And when Joseph had taken the body, so now in 59, he's taking the body. Do you see what's going on here? And he wrapped it and he cleaned it and laid it in his own tomb. Okay. So what am I suggesting to you? I'm suggesting to you that here, okay, is the cross. Then this is a fast forward. This is a fast forward to inform you what eventually happened in the first century. I believe this is a documentation of the first century resurrection. Might that be why so many people in the first century and after Christ and after the destruction of the temple were so passionate and so willing to even die for their faith, because they were the people who witnessed this resurrection occur. See, people really struggle with this, but I think it's because they're not recognizing that it's after his resurrection. Okay? Let me further prove my point. When was the Gospel of Matthew written? It says here, Gospel according to Matthew was composed in Greek probably sometime after 70 CE. So what am I suggesting to you? Well, I'm suggesting to you that the resurrection of the dead already happened in the first century, and that's a brief documentation in a fast forward or a prolepsis style of writing to let you know, by the way, that resurrection actually did happen and many people witnessed it. So anyways, back to the cross, right? And then this is when the centurion says, right? That's what it is. I'm going to suggest to you strongly. Now, I can't say for sure because it could have been a day after his resurrection, but wouldn't that have been documented anyways? I'm going to suggest to you it would have. And all through the epistles, no one else talks about it. So what talks about a resurrection happening right after Jesus died on the cross, right? Nothing on the epistles. So I'm suggesting the after is quite a bit later in the first century. And the person who wrote Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, is documenting it for us and putting it in to that scripture as a fast forward. All right. So let's go back to this because I know I got a lot to prove here. Clearly, it's after his resurrection. No one's going to argue with that because that's exactly what it says. It's not at the cross. But to further confirm, who's the first begotten of the dead? Well, Colossians 1:18, for example, says he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. So he's the firstborn from the dead. There's no question. So when going back to Matthew, you have to look at this and say, okay, well, if he gave up the ghost here, right, and it's talking about after his resurrection, then this couldn't have happened. Plus, he's the first begotten of the dead. So this had to happen after Jesus resurrected. So it's saying it, and the rest of the epistles confirm it. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 15:20. But now is Christ risen from the dead and become what? The first fruits of them that slept. He's the first fruits of them that slept. He's the firstborn of the dead. Therefore, this resurrection did not happen before Jesus resurrected. It's after his resurrection. So now the question is only one thing. How much after his resurrection? And I'm going to suggest to you that it was approximately 35 years later that this resurrection occurred. And since the Gospel of Matthew was written 70 AD slightly past, the person who wrote this would have witnessed it and would have known about it. Because again, Matthew 27 says that they went into the holy city and they appeared unto many. So people witnessed this. Okay, so I'm going to suggest to you it was put in here because people witnessed this resurrection. Now, I also wanted to show you this. Jesus said in John 5, verily, verily, I say unto you, the hour is coming, and now is. Okay, this is it's around the corner. The time is coming, and now it's happening. When the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear shall live. Sound like a resurrection to you? And he said, it's now. It's happening. It's around the corner. That's what he was saying in the first century. So what is he talking about here? I'm going to suggest to you this resurrection was approximately 30 to 35 years after Jesus' resurrection. And that's what I call the fast forward, to let you know that it officially happened, that what Jesus said in John 5:25 occurred. And I believe it happened around 68 AD. Any more proof that a resurrection was about to happen in the first century to validate what I'm saying about this particular scripture, that it was put in here as a let you know, by the way, it all came to pass. And this was witnessed by many people, because Paul himself in Acts 24:15, okay, I'm choosing the Greek here for a reason, okay? And in 24:15, he talks about the resurrection of the just and the unjust. And we've talked about how there's only one resurrection. And Paul doesn't say just that it's going to happen. He says it's about to happen. So he says here in Acts 24:15, I'm going to show you in the Greek, he says that a resurrection is about to be. There's about to be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. Okay, so let me give it to you here in regular terms, if you will. I'll go King James. Okay, in 24, and I'll go 24 and 15, and it says this, right? When Paul says, I have hope toward God, which they themselves also allow, that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. Technically, guys, it's not shall, okay? It's about to be, and that's what I was showing you here, okay? I have hope in God, as they themselves allow, right? And await, by the way, in this version, which I think is even better, that a resurrection is about to happen of both the just and the unjust. Do you see that? It was about to happen in this time frame. And Luke is documenting Paul saying this in the first century, that it's about to happen, okay? This word is melain or mellow in its original, okay? And it means, basically it means it's about to, okay? So for example, here in Matthew 2:13, when Herod was about to seek the child, okay? And that's why even here in the interlinear is about to, all right? So what I'm trying to show you here is that this is a resurrection that was about to happen. So take all that information and read this section one more time, because this is a challenging section. Lots of people have had challenges with this. But I think that this is a fast forward, okay? So let's review it. Jesus gives up the ghost here on the cross in verse 50. In verse 51, it says, behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake and the rocks rent. So there was a big sign that something big just happened, okay? This is what the centurion saw, okay? But inserted is that fast forward. And by the way, I'm just letting you know that resurrection of the dead that Paul was talking about in Acts 24 and Jesus was talking about in John 5. Yeah, that ended up happening. A lot of people witnessed it. Now, back to the cross. Do you see? See what he's doing here? I think that's what's going on, because he says the graves were open and many bodies of the saints which slept arose and came out of the graves after his resurrection. He's still on the cross here. Okay? So this is a fast forward. By the way, after his resurrection, let me paraphrase a little. By the way, after his resurrection, a lot of graves were open and they went into the holy city. This is around 68 AD. Can I say for sure? No, but it's for sure after his resurrection. Okay? And they appeared unto many. And there's your witnessing, which confirms why so many people would be willing to be torn apart that would help, right? If you knew of this, right? And witnessed that might inspire you to say, oh, no, I know what's going on here. Okay, so I'm going to suggest to you something really big happened here. It was a fast forward. He let you know about it. And then when you get to 54, it says, now, when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus, well, where were they watching him? Well, they watched him yield the ghost here. That's where they were watching him on the cross. It's back to the cross, okay? Back to where they were telling you the account. And that's why it says they were with him watching Jesus, saw the earthquake, mentions nothing about the bodies here. Oh, didn't they see the bodies, right? Coming out of the graves? No, they don't mention nothing. Why? Well, because it didn't happen yet. It happened after his resurrection. This is a fast forward view of what ended up happening in 52 and 53. And so they saw those things that were done and feared greatly, saying this truly was the Son of God. What they saw was 51, and that was enough to shake their boots, of course. All right. But what they don't mention here and what they didn't see was this resurrection of a bunch of bodies coming out of the graves, because it was after his resurrection. He hadn't resurrected yet. He already died, here, but he didn't resurrect yet, not for another 3 days. We know that. And that's why, of course, you're seeing now that the body's being taken off the cross. And that's my suggestion, folks, that 50 and 51, of course, happens at the cross when Jesus dies. 52 and 53 are a fast forward to let you know that there was a confirmation there indeed was a resurrection in the first century. And this is biblical documentation, potentially, if I'm right on my interpretation, a biblical documentation in your Holy Bible of the first century resurrection. That's exciting, in my opinion. And when you get to 54, he comes back to the cross and tells you the rest of the account. So, there it is, guys, an interpretation of Matthew 27, where I am suggesting that it is certainly possible, it's possible, that the after his resurrection means about 30 to 35 years after his resurrection. And since the Gospel of Matthew wasn't written till sometime shortly after 70 CE or 70 AD, it is quite possible that if that resurrection happened in 68 to 70 AD, that the writer could have written about it and inserted it there as part of our understanding that that resurrection that Paul was saying is about to happen did indeed happen. Jesus said the time is coming and now is, and that resurrection did indeed happen. And now we don't have to claim to people somehow, no, it's going to happen, or maybe it did, we're not really sure. We can say, no, the Bible says that it happened. It's documented. That might be something really exciting to think about and consider. So I hope I've given you something to think about and consider. And again, guys, I don't slam my fists, but from where I'm sitting, if my interpretation is fairly accurate, then I think we have something really cool on our hands. I think we have a biblical documentation of the first century resurrection. It's certainly a possibility, and I think it's worth considering. In the meantime, guys, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave your comments, ask the questions. I will do my best to answer as always. And thank you so much for sticking with me. And I find your comments very encouraging, and including those who disagree with me. I want to thank all my subscribers that have been around for a really long time. God bless you. Thank you. And I want to say thank you to the new ones. Thank you very much. And I hope, if nothing else, I'm giving you something to think about. And ultimately, what I'm really hoping is that this gives you great hope and gives you great opportunity to have great reasons from the heart to love others as yourself. Thanks so much for giving me this opportunity. In the meantime, do all things with grace and peace.